Προχωράμε στην τρίτη ομιλία. Η τρίτη ομιλία έρχεται από έναν άνθρωπο ο οποίος είναι ο απόλυτος expert. Και είναι ένας άνθρωπος ο οποίος με βάση το κύρος του και με βάση το τι θα μας παρουσιάσει θα μπορέσει να μας οδηγήσει σε αυτό που λέμε η συμβολή των Real World Evidence στην αξιολόγηση τεχνολογίας. Είναι η Ann-Sophie. I would like to welcome you. I would like to say on behalf of the audience that we are very honored having you here today. I would like to say that this is a time of profound change in the Greek pharmaceutical industry, and what's most important than hearing from the experts, at least in the analysis. So we are looking forward to hearing from you today, and of course later on to discuss all the aspects of your presentation.
Thank you very much. So, I don't know if the presentation. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation today that I can be here with you. My name is Ann-Sophie, and I'm part of IQVIA. So, who is IQVIA and what is the power of IQVIA? The power of IQVIA is that we are connecting data, analytics, technology, and expertise. We have 55,000 experts that are connected in the world. So you may ask yourself, why am I standing here? So I'm standing here because I'm currently leading a global interest group for HTA experts all over IQVIA. So in case we have questions from our clients, then come to us and say, well, we have an HTA, we need to submit an HTA dossier, for example, for different countries. Do you have experts in those countries? Then you come to me or you come to my colleagues and we connect you with these experts. Actually, I'm also facing HTA work and requirements in my daily work, so I have a lot to do with that. What we see, what is the main reason why we do have these health technology assessments, is that pharmaceutical prices are under siege. We see there is a lot, costs are rising, there's more and more costs coming up for the payers, and there needs to be some cost controlling implemented. So payers in Europe are more and more focusing on managing those pharmaceutical prices, and the affordability is based on HTAs. So I'm talking about HTAs, but just really quickly, what is an HTA? What we see as an HTA is a multidisciplinary process. So we have different disciplines in a group, in a team included to fulfill all requirements all around this HTA process. So I'm talking about medicines, I'm talking about biostatisticians, pharmaceutical team members that really implement the whole team of an HTA to submit such a dossier. It summarizes the information around the medical, the social, economic value of a product. And the aim is to show the best value. You know, around in the pharmaceutical context, what is efficacy? You know about the efficiency, but what we need to show is cost efficiency. So, well, or cost effectiveness, so efficiency, sorry. The main problem we are focusing here in Europe is that we have around 50 different national and regional HTA bodies. Well, implementing some are on the national level, it's just one, and then we have, for example, Spain with different levels on the regional level. All have different procedural frameworks, all have different methodologies. So we're facing a huge variety of different requirements. Nevertheless, I took out 6 different countries. So we have here on the slide France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, UK, and Sweden. Just to give you an example of what those countries are requiring in Germany and what kind of evidence do they want to see. They want to see, first of all, clinical evidence and economic evidence, all of them in different kind of ways. But if we think about evidence, there are different types of evidence that we can submit. On the one hand side, we have those randomized clinical trials, and on the other hand, we have the real-world evidence data. The big differences between those two, well, there are a lot of differences, but the big difference is really between the randomized controlled trials, that we have a very limited number of patients, and that we have a very selected patient population in there. We have usually a head-to-head comparison or a placebo-controlled trial. When we look to the real-world evidence, then we see that we have here a broad patient population, which is not that selected, and normally we have no direct comparator. So when we talk about real-world evidence, it's a bit more, it can be understood more. So what we have here, it's the evaluation of effectiveness, of safety, of quality, but this evaluation is represented in a clinical practice. So it shows a bit of real life. We have different types of outcomes that we can measure with real-world evidence, such as clinical outcomes, economic outcomes, but also very patient-reported outcomes that are getting more and more important and in the focus what payers are requiring and want to see. I want to come back to the HTA dossiers and the requirements that we have. When we're talking about real-world evidence in those 6 examples that I brought here for the countries, we see that real-world evidence is accepted in some parts. We see, for example, the epidemiology is accepted. We see for economic reason it's accepted. But if we're thinking about clinical effectiveness, or if we think about another opportunity instead of randomized controlled trials, then there are only 2 countries where you can submit real-world evidence. It's only the Netherlands and it's only UK. All other countries would not accept real-world evidence by itself without an adequate RCT. So why is this like this? This is due to the evidence-based medicine systems that we have in the other countries. So all countries normally recommend the strongest type of evidence, but especially if we look, also in the discussions we know from the UNETA, if we look in the requirements that, for example, Italy, Germany, France, and Sweden have, that they really require the strongest recommendation and type of evidence. So what they want to see is the classic RCT. You see here on the right side, I brought an example, well, from my German context, where they clearly write down what kind of evidence level they want to see. And from our experience, only the first 2 levels are really accepted. The 3rd level, you may have a chance, but normally there is no good beneficial outcome. And the other evidence level are not accepted anymore. So you see here that all data what is defined as real-world evidence data is in a low evidence level and won't be accepted by itself. This is due to there are disadvantages and advantages of both types of evidence, but that just RCTs are accepted is that we have in RCTs this very limited and very well-defined patient population. We have a randomization, and most of the time we have also a blinding, which reduces the bias. And this bias is a very important factor. This leads that we have in RCTs a very high internal validity and that we have a low external validity. Instead to that, or compared to that, we have in the real-world evidence data a very high external validity and a very low internal validity. So at the moment, or the current situation we see in Europe and for most countries in Europe, especially for those 4, is that they will only accept the strongest recommendations. So they want to see in a health technology assessment dossier that you submit to the authorities, they want to see classic RCTs. the strongest recommendation. Only UK and Netherlands accept at the moment the real-world evidence data. However, there's still possibilities to implement the real-world evidence data. We know since a decade that France and UK implemented, and France, we see that they're implementing it more and more. And it is beneficial, actually. They have to submit their classic RCT, but they add on top this real-world evidence data to support the message they want to send to the authorities. They bring in the actual practice setting in the real-world evidence data to support their own classic RCTs. So they combine both types of evidence, and they gain a better benefit and a better outcome of their assessment. And this better benefit, of course, has a big implementation on the price later on. There are also other possibilities to implement real-world evidence, even if it does not seem at the first glimpse of an eye that it's necessary for HTA, but it's actually something what we are doing currently a lot, is working on clinical study protocols. This is really a step back from an HTA dossier. We're moving a step forward before we are writing such a dossier, before a clinical study is even brought on their way. So what we are doing here is we try to implement the reality, the practice into these study protocols. We know from evaluation and analysis that before that time when study protocols were more or less QL based, that most of these study protocols, around 60%, needed to fulfill amendments. So there were amendments in 60%. So there is a big chance to start from the beginning, to get real-world data sets, to get payers inside, to get patients inside, to implement a study protocol from the beginning that meets your clinical requirements, of course, for your approval, but which meets also the requirements that are made for HTAs. And this is why you should already ask at a very early stage, what do payers think about this study protocol? And there is a chance to update your study protocol by updating your knowledge around real-world evidence data sets. We know payers are more and more focusing on costs on pharmaceutical prices. They're basing more and more their decision on HTAs. So what you need to do, and what is really important at this time, is to implement, to know about the clinical practice, to see what kind of evidence you need, to learn about your product and about the surrounding of your product. It will always be that you will need a classic RCT. You will always need this classic RCT because it will be evidence-based medicine in most of the systems in Europe. But what we know now is that the more real-world evidence data you submit with and additionally to your classical RCT, the beneficial it is. So it makes sense to start at an early phase, even for early consultation, when you have your study protocol, when you're starting with your clinical program, that you go to the OINETA or you go to those national, regional HTA authorities and you discuss with them your product if it meets the requirements. So you are successful in the end. So this is really a good opportunity to use the real-world evidence data. Overall, there are different opportunities for real-world evidence. Nevertheless, we will always need also clinical RCTs. Thank you very much.
Please sit, and soon we're going to get the questions from the audience.